Alright, so Laura dressed up for the part for sure. She dressed up in winter outfit because today we are talking about the weather and the climate and everything you need to know about traveling in New Zealand in August, which is the last month of winter. So most people try to avoid traveling New Zealand in winter because, well, they hear about all the very cold temperature. But because it is the low season, you get many benefits of traveling in New Zealand in winter, especially in August, with cheaper rental price, cheaper accommodation price, sometimes cheaper activity prices, and on top of that you get the whole country to yourself, and the sceneries of New Zealand, especially in the South Island, are all the better for winter because you have snow-capped mountain sceneries all around. How wonderful! So if you are planning to have a mind-blowing adventure in New Zealand in August, today is the day where you're going to learn everything about the weather. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so beautiful people of the internet, here's what's going to happen right now. Laura is going to tell you 5 tips for traveling in New Zealand in August before we talk about the weather. Let's get started.
Okay, our first tip for traveling in August is that August is the low season in New Zealand, which means that you don't tend to need to book too far ahead when it comes to accommodations and activities as you're traveling around. However, that rule doesn't really apply to the towns which have ski fields, so like the ski season towns like Queenstown or Methven on the South Island or Oakune on the North Island, for instance. Those towns are usually pretty fully booked during this time in August, so they're the few exceptions to the rule. But generally, low season means you can travel a little bit more spontaneously. Next up, make sure that you check the road updates before you head out on a road trip. Sometimes in the more mountainous regions of New Zealand, whether there can be snow on the mountain passes, for instance, so just check up on the New Zealand Transport Agency website for any sort of road updates before you set out. Next up, if you are hitting the ski fields, make sure that you don't forget your sunscreen, which seems pretty crazy, but during this time of the year, there are some really great sunny days as well when you're up there in the mountains. So, but that UV rays are intensified when they're reflecting off the snow, so make sure that, even though it's winter, still slap on the sunscreen, especially if you're going to higher altitudes. Next up, if you are planning on doing some weather-dependent activities, which could mean doing perhaps heli hiking in Franz Josef or Mount Cook, doing some scenic flights, or even in some places that are still open for whitewater rafting, like in on the Tongariro River, for instance, that sort of thing. If these weather-dependent activities, if you are doing those sort of activities, make sure you plan maybe a couple of days for rescheduling in those areas, just in case they do get cancelled. And then finally, make sure to pack some extra wool layers, so it's usually
it just keeps you warmer, basically, right?
Yeah.
So polypropylene and merino wools are two materials which are perfect for underlayer, for thermal layers, right? And they're the best kind of outfit to have in New Zealand. As the weather is so changing, what you may want to do is to have a couple of those underlayers always at the ready that you can put on, and then all you need is actually a windbreak, like a rain jacket, for example, that Laura was talking about. And so it's a really good combination for when you're traveling in New Zealand in winter to keep yourself warm.
I even have some on now.
Exactly. All right, so we are going to go back to live chat and then we'll get back to the New Zealand weather in August. Alright, so let's begin with the typical temperature in New Zealand in August. Being the last month of summer, August is one of the coldest months in New Zealand, and you will find that the temperature are slightly different all around the country. So let's go over them one by one. So we'll begin with northern New Zealand, which is northern Auckland and Tauranga, with an average of about 12 degrees Celsius during the day in August, which is 53 degrees Fahrenheit for the Freedom Unit users. Central North Island is Hamilton, Taupo, and Rotorua, an average of 8 degrees Celsius, which is 46 degrees Fahrenheit. If we move on to the southwest North Island, sorry, this one's a mouthful, that's New Plymouth, Palmerston North, and Wellington, 9 degrees Celsius, which is 48 degrees Fahrenheit. In eastern North Island, we have Gisborne, Napier, and Wairarapa. That's where you go get the good wine in New Zealand. And that's an average of 10 degrees Celsius, which is 50 degrees Fahrenheit. I'd go for some mulled wine right now.
Oh, yes.
Ooh. All right. Then we're going to go to the South Islands. In northern South Island, we have Blenheim and Nelson, and that's 9 degrees Celsius, which is 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Again, those are the daytime average temperature for the region. In western South Island, we have Westport, Hokitika, home of the West Coast Treetop Walkway, and Milford Sound. The average is between 6 and 9 degrees Celsius, which is between 42 to 48 degrees Fahrenheit. In eastern South Island, which is Kaikoura, Christchurch, and Timaru, we have an average of 7 degrees Celsius, which is 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Inland South Island, Lake Tekapo, Queenstown, and Alexandra, you can expect 4 to 6 degrees Celsius, which is 39 to 42 degrees Fahrenheit. And finally, let's wrap that up with southern New Zealand, which is Dunedin, Invercargill, and that is going to be about 7 degrees Celsius, which is 45 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, let's wrap that up and get back to the live chat. Here. What were we doing?
We're about to talk about the rainfall in August in New Zealand.
Okay, so let's continue with our theme of the week and talk about the different rainfall and other weather patterns that you can expect in New Zealand in August. And no rising position. Boom. All right. So the other weather pattern that you can find in August are basically mostly rain, right? We're talking about the end of winter in New Zealand, and there's going to be a lot of rain, and you will have basically some of the highest rainfall in the whole year. So we're going to go again onto the map that Laura is next to, and we're going to go region by region and go over what kind of rainfalls you can expect. So, starting again with northern New Zealand, that's Northland, Auckland, and Tauranga, you can expect about 150 millimeters, which is 5.5 inches. In central North Island, which is Hamilton, Rotorua, and Taupo, 110 millimeters, which is 4.3 inches. In the southwest North Island, we have New Plymouth, Palmerston North, and Wellington, beautiful capital city, 120 millimeters, which is 4.7 inches. In the eastern North Island, we have Gisborne, Napier, and Wairarapa. That's 70 millimeters, which is 2.7 inches. In northern South Island, with changing islands now, taking the ferry, Blenheim and Nelson, we have 80 millimeters, which is 3 inches. We have western South Island, which is Westport, Hokitika, and Milford Sound. That is a lot, 240 to 430 millimeters, so between 9.4 and 17 inches. The west coast is always the rainiest place in New Zealand. We also have the eastern South Island, Kaikoura, Christchurch, and Timaru, 70 millimeters, which is 2.7 inches. Inland South Island, Lake Tekapo, Queenstown, and Alexandra, it's 30 to 60 millimeters, so between 1 to 2.3 inches. This is the lowest amount of rainfall just because pretty much it's all snow. And at southern New Zealand, we have Dunedin, Invercargill, and that's 70 millimeters, which is 2.7 inches of rain in average in August. Next item on our agenda when covering the weather in New Zealand in August is to actually just kind of give you a bit more of an insight in what are the best places to visit in New Zealand in August, because, well, there are some places which are significantly better than others. So let's begin with that. So one of the great things about traveling in New Zealand in August is the fact that you'll be able to find pretty much all different type of climates to suit your trip. As you saw just before when we were talking about the different temperature, there is a wide range of temperatures right here. But which means that you'll be able to experience the epic ski fields of New Zealand, which you definitely cannot do all year round, but you still get to experience the all year round activities such as the hot pools and the mountainous landscapes, but you can experience them with much less tourists around you. So with that in mind, we have selected a few places that we recommend you visit in August, and Laura is going to get us going.
Yeah, so one really cool place to visit during August, which is in winter, is Wanaka, because Wanaka has proximity to two really popular ski fields, Cardrona and Treblecone. And yeah, so that's the nearest town to those two ski fields, and Treblecone is the largest ski field on the South Island. So yeah, if you want to have that sort of big ski field experience that's in New Zealand, then that would be a good place to go.
Alright, so I'm going to do an opposite thing right here, and I'm going to send you to Pahia. So Pahia is in the Bay of Islands, or kind of almost all the way to the top of the North Island. And it is where you're going to get the warmest climate, and you're going to get plenty of coastline activities, which are still going to be opened in August, despite the fact that it's going to be winter. So if you want to do this summer escape from the New Zealand winter, well, that's the place you want to head to.
Next up, try going to Rotorua, which is a really fabulous place to see during winter, where you can see its geothermal activity much more visible as you see hot steam rising into the cold air. There's lots of different geothermal parks to discover around the area, and there's also lots of hot pools. So if you are feeling a little bit chilly, then you can always warm yourself up in some nice natural geothermal hot pools.
Well, speaking of hot pools, Hanmer Springs is a fantastic place to visit in the South Island of New Zealand in August. Hanmer Springs is famous for its hot pool complex, of course, but there is also local ski fields, and there are snowfalls literally within the town. It's one of those small towns when you can actually have those kind of hot pools experience, but literally be able to walk amongst the snow, which is not many of the places. Quite often in New Zealand, the snow towns are located much lower than the ski field themselves, and so it's not often that you get snow-covered snow towns in New Zealand. All right, what's next?
Finally, we would like to recommend the Coromandel. So the Coromandel Peninsula, which is quite close to Auckland, is usually packed in summer. So if you want to experience it during a much quieter time, but while the weather is still actually pretty decent, especially for the winter in New Zealand, it will have one of the warmest climates of the country during this time, then yeah, August is a great time to experience the Coromandel, take a look at some of its amazing beaches, do some hiking in the hills, as well as in amazing kauri forests, which are full of some of the largest types of trees in New Zealand. It's just a cool place to hang out.
All right, so that wraps up our suggestions of places to visit in August. Next up, we'll talk about a packing list.
Yeah.
Whoopsie. All right, so we'll continue with our coverage of the weather in New Zealand in August, and we're going to kind of wrap this one up with a few suggestions of things you must pack when traveling in New Zealand in August. And for that, I'll pass you to the beautiful Laura.
Actually, the first thing that we recommend to pack for August is a beanie. So yeah, obviously keep your head warm. It's if you usually when people are traveling in New Zealand, it's to do a lot of outdoor activities. So yeah, any extra sort of accessories like beanies, and the next thing on our list is going to be scarf or a buff, something to keep your neck warm is highly recommended. Especially if you're going to be spending quite a lot of time outside, which typically is what happens when you're traveling around New Zealand. Another thing to make sure that you have in August, but at any time of the year in New Zealand, is a rain jacket. It's the weather is on and off all the time, changing all the time, so having a rain jacket handy, even just in your day pack, available there, it's a really good way to make sure that you don't get soaked through if it does start raining. Usually it's better to have a rain jacket in New Zealand compared to an umbrella, because usually the wind and umbrellas don't really mix. Next up, make sure that you do pack some thermal layers. So usually wool layers is a really good option. Merino wool is kind of what they sort of is highly available in New Zealand, but there's different thermal layer materials that you can get overseas. So yeah, just having these extra underlayers is highly recommended, and things like merino wool are very breathable as well, so you tend to find that you don't need to keep taking them off and putting them back on again, but you do have the option to do that when you are packing with layers in mind. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Some extra thermal layers is definitely a must do for August. Next up are some mid layers. So we're talking more about, like some hoodies, or basically the stuff that we're wearing now is like an extra jumper to put on top of your thermal layers. That is the the layer that you can take on and off if you get too hot, and it provides you with much more extra warmth if you need it, which most likely will be that you will. So yeah, mid layers, definitely make sure you pack a few of those in your suitcase or backpack. Next up, you'll want some waterproof hiking shoes or hiking boots, whatever your preference is, but make sure that they are waterproof because, yeah, like I say, it does rain on and off in New Zealand, so having soaked through shoes is never fun. A lot of the activities to do are, again, outside, doing either really short walks to see some beautiful landscapes or sights for sightseeing, but otherwise a lot of longer walks are really popular in New Zealand as well. So having a good pair of walking shoes that, if you are going to be on your feet all day, are going to be comfortable and, again, not soaked through because they're waterproof. And finally, make sure you have some woolen socks. So this kind of ties in with the waterproof hiking shoes. Woolen socks, if they do get wet, they tend to dry out much faster. They're also much warmer than cotton socks. So having like nice snug feet is going to just like make you just feel so much better than being all cold and miserable in your thinnest cotton layers. It tends to be when you are spending a lot of time outside. That's, yeah, usually where the downer is if you're not well prepared with the correct materials that you're wearing. So yeah, definitely wool compared to cotton is definitely much more recommended for New Zealand.
All right, so that wraps up our coverage of the New Zealand weather in August. There is much more information on nzpocketguide.com. There is a link to an article specifically about the New Zealand weather in August in the description of this video. Make sure to hit like and subscribe. That's the thing that we're supposed to ask you guys to do. And in the meantime, enjoy New Zealand.